The battle raged on across the alien planet, the sounds of war deafening as explosions rocked the ground. Smoke filled the air, casting a dark, heavy fog over the battlefield. In the distance, the skyline of the alien city was barely visible through the chaos, its tall, strange structures now crumbling under the weight of the conflict. The ground shook with every blast as the soldiers fought fiercely, determined to either protect their land or conquer it. Among the human warriors stood Captain Kale, a battle-hardened soldier known for his courage and skill. His armor was scratched and scorched, evidence of the intense fighting he had already endured. Kale's eyes were narrowed as he scanned the scene, his mind sharp, focused on the task at hand. He had seen death before, but today felt different. The war had taken a heavy toll on both sides, and today, something felt off. The alien forces were relentless. Their technology was advanced, their weapons deadly. But Kale had led his troops with the heart of a lion. He knew that this war was not just about survival, it was about securing a future for humanity. If they lost today, it could mean the end of their civilization. As Kale moved forward, his boots crunching over the charred earth, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden cry. A strange, high-pitched scream cut through the noise of battle. Kale's instincts kicked in, and he instinctively turned toward the sound. His eyes widened in disbelief as he saw something he had never expected to witness on the battlefield. At the center of the chaos, amidst the bodies of fallen soldiers, lay an alien figure. She was unlike any Kale had ever seen. Her skin was a pale, almost glowing blue, and her long, flowing hair shimmered like strands of silver. She wore a delicate, ornate crown that glowed softly with an otherworldly light. Her beauty was striking, but it was the blood spilling from her side that caught Kale's attention. This was no ordinary soldier. It wasn't even an ordinary alien. This was Lyria, the alien princess. Lyria's body was trembling as she lay on the ground, blood staining the white stone beneath her. Her breath came in shallow, desperate gasps, and her eyes, once fierce and full of life, now appeared empty and vacant. She was dying, and Kale could do nothing but watch in shock as the princess of their enemies struggled for life. In that moment, Kale felt a wave of emotions he had not anticipated. This was the enemy. She was the leader of the alien forces. She had ordered countless attacks against humanity, causing unimaginable pain and suffering. Yet, as he gazed at her, Kale could not deny the sympathy he felt. This wasn't just a soldier. This was a person in need. And somehow, she seemed more vulnerable than anyone he had ever fought against. Kale's heart pounded in his chest as he made a decision. Against everything he had been taught and everything he had believed in as a soldier, he moved toward her. He knew it was dangerous. He knew he could be killed on the spot. But something deep inside him, something he couldn't explain, told him that he couldn't leave her to die here, alone in the midst of the chaos. As Kale approached, he noticed that her crown flickered weakly, its light dimming with each passing second. It was a symbol of power, a symbol of her royal status, but now it seemed like nothing more than a faint, dying glow. She wasn't just the enemy's leader anymore, she was a person on the verge of death, fighting for her last breath. Kale kneeled beside her, his armor scraping against the stones. He could feel the heat from her body as she struggled. Her skin was cold to the touch, her pulse weak. She barely moved, her body barely responding to his presence. Still, Kale placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her, trying to show her that even in the middle of a war, some things mattered more than victory. "Stay with me," Kale whispered, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him. Her eyes fluttered open slightly, locking with his. Her gaze was filled with pain, but also confusion. She didn't understand why he was here, why a human warrior would show such care for her. She had been the enemy, and now, for reasons neither of them fully understood, their fates seemed inexplicably connected. Kale knew that he couldn't just leave her to die. She wasn't just a soldier. She was someone who had once held power and influence, someone who had commanded armies, someone who had a purpose. In that moment, Kale felt something stir inside him, a responsibility. If he let her die now, everything they had fought for would mean nothing. He glanced around quickly, seeing the approaching soldiers. If he didn't act now, they would both be dead within moments. Kale looked back at Lyria, his face set with determination, "I can't let you die like this," he said, more to himself than to her. Without thinking, he removed his helmet, revealing his face. His blood was pumping quickly, his thoughts racing, but he knew there was no turning back. As Cale reached toward the wound on Lyria's side, his mind was filled with the thoughts of what this could mean for the war, for humanity, and for his own future. He didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was clear: whatever came next, it would change everything. And with that, Cale made the decision that would forever alter the course of history. Cale's heart raced as he hovered over the alien princess Lyria. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the gravity of the decision he was about to make. He knew he was crossing a line that, once crossed, could never be undone. The sound of distant gunfire and explosions continued to echo through the battlefield. But in that moment, everything around him faded. It was just him and her, a human warrior and an alien princess, strangers brought together by fate in the most unlikely of circumstances. Lyria's eyes fluttered open, barely able to focus. She tried to speak, but the words came out as nothing more than weak gasps. Her breath was shallow, her pulse faint, and her once proud form now looked fragile, vulnerable. Cale's mind raced. She had been the enemy, the symbol of everything humanity had been fighting against. But now, as he stared at her, all he could see was a person, someone in pain, someone who needed help. The humanity inside him, the soldier's code, and the simple instinct to protect took over. Cale reached out and gently touched her shoulder, his gloved hand brushing against her cool, sweat-drenched skin. Her body stiffened at first, but when she didn't push him away, he took it as a sign to act. She was dying, and if he didn't act quickly, she would slip away right in front of him, leaving nothing but a cold, lifeless body. He couldn't let that happen, not after everything they had both endured to get to this point. His mind raced through the choices. Should he leave her to die, as was expected of him? Should he just walk away and let fate take its course? Or should he do something completely unthinkable? Cale couldn't help but think of the stories he'd heard about alien biology, how their bodies were radically different from human anatomy. Human blood, his blood would never be able to help. It would only make things worse. But still, the idea of leaving her here, alone in the dark, haunted him. His gaze shifted to her crown. The once proud symbol of her royalty flickered dimly, its light struggling to stay lit as if the princess herself were fading. Her blood stained the ground beneath her, and the soft glow of her crown grew weaker with every breath she took. Cale's chest tightened. He was a soldier, trained to kill, to fight for his people, to uphold the law of war. But in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. The lines between enemy and ally, right and wrong, all seemed to blur. The only thing that mattered now was saving her, because if he didn't, he would never be able to forgive himself. Without thinking, Cale made a choice. "I'm sorry," he muttered to no one in particular, his words a whisper against the chaos of the battlefield. He removed his helmet, revealing his face to her for the first time. She could see the resolve in his eyes, but also the confusion. Was this a trap? Was he just toying with her in her moment of weakness? But in her dimmed state, she couldn't make sense of it. Cale reached toward his side, his hand shaking slightly as he unclipped a small vial from his belt. It was a medical kit, designed to help humans heal quickly in case of injury. But instead of using it for himself, he did the unthinkable. He pressed the vial to his wrist, pulling the needle into his skin, drawing blood into the vial. His blood, thick and dark, swirled inside the clear container. The action felt almost ceremonial, like some kind of desperate prayer that had no guarantee of success. He hesitated for a moment, looking down at her, his mind clouded with doubt. What was he doing? Could his blood truly save her, or would it only hasten her death? But as the seconds ticked by, he knew he had no choice. If he didn't try, he would lose her, and this moment would haunt him for the rest of his life. Cale gently lifted Lyria's head, cradling it in his arm, and leaned in close. Her face was pale, but she still had the faintest hint of life left in her. He felt her weak heartbeat against his arm, a fragile rhythm that spoke of life clinging to existence. With a trembling hand, Cale poured a few drops of his blood into her mouth. It was a simple act, but the weight of it was immense. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Cale held his breath, his eyes never leaving her face. Had he made a grave mistake? Was he about to watch her slip away forever? Then, something began to change. At first, it was subtle. Lyria's body twitched, her fingers curling into a fist. Her eyes flickered open once more, brighter this time, glowing with an otherworldly light. The crown on her head, which had been dimming, suddenly flared up, casting a bright golden glow across her face. Cale could hardly believe his eyes. Was this what he had hoped for? Lyria let out a sharp breath, a gasp, as though she had been submerged in water and was finally taking in air. Her body began to pulse with energy, strange and unfamiliar, but powerful. It was as though something inside her had awakened. Cale pulled back, his hand hovering over her, unsure of what he was witnessing. Lyria's body shuddered, her chest rising and falling with each breath. But now, there was something else. Her skin, once pale and sickly, was now glowing with vitality. Her eyes, those piercing, alien eyes, were now a brilliant, unnatural shade of gold. She was no longer just the fragile princess he had found dying on the battlefield. She was something more, something different. Cale's heart skipped a beat. What had he done? Had he just saved the princess of his enemies? Or had he unknowingly set something much greater into motion? He looked into her eyes, searching for answers, but all he saw was confusion, and perhaps something more, a spark of recognition, or was it anger? Before he could ask anything, Lyria's voice broke through the silence. Why? She whispered, her voice raspy but filled with a strange power. Why did you do this? Cale's mind raced. The question she had asked seemed so simple, yet it held the weight of the universe. He wasn't sure of the answer himself. Why had he done it? Maybe it was because, deep down, he had known that this wasn't just about victory or defeat, it was about humanity. It was about doing the right thing, even when the world around him was collapsing. But as he looked into her glowing eyes, Cale realized that this was just the beginning. What had started as a simple act of mercy had now become something much bigger than either of them could understand, and the consequences of that decision, they were yet to unfold. Lyria's transformation wasn't just physical, it was as if her very essence had shifted. Cale stood frozen, watching in disbelief as the alien princess, once on the brink of death, now pulsed with an energy so intense it seemed to reverberate in the air around them. Her skin, once pale and fragile, now glowed with an inner light, her eyes burning with golden intensity. She was no longer just an alien princess, she had become something else entirely. Something beyond belief. Her chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm, and her hands twitched, as though testing the newfound strength within them. Lyria's gaze, once dull and desperate, now locked onto Cale with a force that sent a chill down his spine. There was no question about it, she had changed. But the question still lingered in Cale's mind. What had he done? The blood he had given her, his own blood, had somehow awakened something in her. It had brought her back from the brink of death, but it had also altered her in ways that Cale couldn't yet understand. Lyria's breathing became more measured, and she slowly pushed herself up, her movements fluid and unnatural in their grace. Cale instinctively took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't known what to expect, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. Lyria's eyes scanned her surroundings, taking in the destruction of the battlefield, the dead bodies of soldiers from both sides scattered across the land. She looked at Cale, but there was no fear in her gaze, only curiosity, almost as if she were seeing the world with new eyes. She reached up slowly, touching the crown that had once been the symbol of her power, now glowing with a fierce energy that was unmistakably human in its origin. She spoke, her voice rich with an unfamiliar tone, a depth that wasn't there before. What have you done? Cale swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I saved you. Lyria tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. Saved me. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. You've given me your blood, human. That's not saving. Cale wasn't sure whether it was the anger in her voice or the piercing nature of her gaze that made him feel like a child in front of her, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. He had expected gratitude, or at least a sign of relief, but instead, Lyria's presence felt heavy, charged with something new. She had been brought back from death, yes, But now she was something else entirely, something that felt less human and far more dangerous. I didn't know what else to do, Kale muttered, more to himself than to her. You were dying, and now I am reborn, Lyria replied, her tone colder than before, as though the very act of being saved had caused her to question everything she had known. She stood fully now, her movements steady and controlled. Yet there was an unsettling power in every step she took. Kale couldn't help but notice the way the ground seemed to respond to her presence. The air growing still as she moved, Lyria's gaze turned to the horizon, where the smoke from the ongoing battle still lingered in the distance. The sounds of war had not ceased. There was still fighting, still chaos. But Lyria didn't seem to care about that anymore. Her focus was on something far greater than the battle she had once commanded. She was no longer the alien princess, she was a force, and it was clear that her thoughts were consumed with something beyond her people's war. What will you do now? Kale asked, his voice almost hesitant. He had no idea how to deal with this version of Lyria. This wasn't the fragile princess who had nearly bled out in his arms. This was something far more powerful, far more dangerous. Lyria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she raised a hand, and for a brief moment, Kale thought she was about to unleash some kind of weapon. But no, her hand merely hovered in the air as she concentrated, her fingers twitching as though she were reaching for something just out of her grasp. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, as though responding to her unspoken command. I can feel it, she murmured, almost to herself. The power, the change, it's in my veins. It's like nothing I've ever felt before. Kel's mind raced. He had heard rumors about the strange properties of alien biology, how their bodies were capable of incredible transformations, but he had never seen anything like this. He had given his blood to save her, but it seemed to have done something far more than that. She wasn't just alive again. She was evolving. The energy that had coursed through her when he had given her his blood had somehow merged with her own, creating something entirely new. I didn't mean for this, Kale said, his voice filled with uncertainty. I just wanted to save you. I didn't know. Lyria turned to face him then, her golden eyes burning with intensity. You didn't know what, Kale? That you would unleash a power you couldn't control? That you would change the very course of this war? Her voice was calm, almost too calm, as though she were already accepting the consequences of what had happened. Kale took a step back. He had saved her, yes, but now he was starting to realize that by doing so, he might have unleashed something far more dangerous than he could handle. The power emanating from Lyria was unlike anything he had ever felt before, and he couldn't help but wonder what kind of impact it would have on the rest of the war, and on the universe. The ground beneath their feet shook again, more violently this time. Kel's heart raced as the sky above seemed to darken, the winds picking up as though reacting to Lyria's newfound strength. She looked up, her eyes narrowing. They will come, Lyria said softly, her voice carrying a sense of finality. The council will come for me. They'll want to destroy what you've made, but they won't understand. They won't see what you've given me. This is not just about power. It's about something much greater. Kel's mind raced. The council of elders who ruled over her people, the ones who had sent her to war against humanity. They would never accept what had happened. They wouldn't allow this transformation to stand. Kale could almost hear their voices in his head, demanding that she be brought to justice, that she be punished for her corruption. What do we do now? Kale asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had always fought to protect humanity, but now, standing before Lyria, he wasn't sure what the right choice was. He had saved her, but in doing so, he had set something in motion that neither of them could control. Lyria's gaze softened for a brief moment, and for the first time since her transformation, there was a glimmer of something almost human in her eyes. We survive, she said simply. Together, whether you like it or not. And with that, Kale realized that his world and everything he had fought for had just been irrevocably changed. The days that followed were unlike anything Kale had ever experienced. The battlefield, once filled with the noise of war and the cries of dying soldiers, had become eerily quiet. The human forces, still fighting for their survival, now found themselves facing a new kind of enemy, a force they didn't understand. And at the center of it all stood Lyria, transformed and powerful. A being who had once been their enemy, but was now something entirely different. Cale had spent hours watching her, trying to make sense of what had happened. She was still the same, in many ways her appearance, her alien nature, her otherworldly beauty, but in every action, in every glance, there was something new, something dangerous. The power inside her was undeniable, and it seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. Lyria no longer seemed like a fragile princess. She had become a force of nature, something that seemed to bend reality itself. Her once delicate features were now sharp and commanding. The light that radiated from her crown, once a faint glow, now shone with an intensity that could blind a person if they stared too long. Cale had seen people with power before: warriors, leaders, generals, but this was different. This wasn't just power. This was raw energy, something primal and unstoppable. At times, Cale would catch her staring into the distance, her eyes far away, as though she was seeing something no one else could. Her mind, it seemed, was no longer her own. She was becoming something else, something she couldn't control. And it terrified him. Terrified him because he knew that the more she changed, the further away she drifted from the person he had tried so hard to save. Lyria had spoken little since that fateful moment when he had given her his blood, but her actions spoke volumes. She moved with an unnatural grace, as though the ground itself was willing to carry her. The air seemed to part for her as she walked, swirling in her wake like a storm held in check. Her presence was magnetic, and Cale found himself drawn to her despite the fear that gnawed at him. They had spent days hiding in the remnants of an abandoned outpost, the only place that seemed safe enough to avoid detection by the alien forces that were still searching for them. Cale had to admit he hadn't expected this to last so long. He had thought that after saving her, after giving her his blood, she would have died, or at least returned to her former, fragile self. Instead, she had become something unrecognizable, and with every passing hour, Cale felt more like a stranger in his own world. But it was in the quiet moments, when the chaos of the battlefield was distant, that Cale began to realize the full scope of what was happening. Lyria had once been a leader, a symbol of her people's strength, but now she was something far more dangerous. The power that coursed through her veins wasn't just a physical transformation. It was a complete shift in her being, and the more Cale watched, the more he realized that the consequences of that shift were far-reaching. The Alien Council, the very leaders who had sent Lyria to war, would stop at nothing to reclaim her. They would not allow an abomination like this to live, let alone thrive, and they wouldn't hesitate to destroy everything in their path to ensure that she was brought to heel. Cale had heard rumors of the Council's ruthlessness, how they had crushed dissent with brutal efficiency, how they had destroyed entire worlds to maintain their control. The mere thought of what they might do to Lyria made Cale's stomach turn. He had already seen the consequences of unchecked power, how Lyria's transformation had left her a fragile creature, vulnerable to forces she could no longer understand. But what if she wasn't the one who was vulnerable? What if it was humanity that was at risk? Lyria had grown distant, not just in body but in mind. She spent hours meditating, her gaze often fixed on the horizon, her eyes glowing with that strange golden light. She said little, but Cale could see the change in her. She was losing herself in the power she had once tried to escape. She was becoming something new, and Cale wasn't sure if it was something he could save her from. One evening, as the sun set and the world was bathed in a soft, golden light, Cale approached her. He had never seen her this still before. Her usual energy, that magnetic presence, was gone. She sat in the middle of a ruined courtyard, her legs crossed, her eyes closed in concentration. It was as if she were communing with something beyond herself, something ancient and vast. Lyria. Cale called softly, unsure of how to approach her. She didn't respond at first, but then, slowly, she opened her eyes and turned to him. Her golden gaze locked onto his, and for a brief moment, Cale saw something flicker behind them, a brief flash of the person she had once been. "Cale," she whispered, her voice distant, almost dreamlike. "It's happening. The power is awakening inside me." Cale swallowed hard, his voice thick with fear. "Lyria, this isn't you. You don't have to do this. You don't have to let this power control you. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Control?" she asked, her tone low, almost amused. "Do you not see, Kale? I am control. I no longer need the Council's approval, the approval of any being. I am beyond them. I am beyond all of you." The words struck Kale like a physical blow. This wasn't the princess he had fought to save. This wasn't the person who had been on the brink of death, struggling for her life. This was something different, something far more dangerous. Kale took a step back, his heart racing. "You're losing yourself, Lyria. The power's changing you. It's not you anymore." But Lyria didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes fluttered shut again, and she tilted her head back, as though listening to a distant sound. Something only she could hear. The air around them seemed to thrum with energy, as if the earth itself was responding to her presence. "I am not losing myself, Kale," she murmured. "I am becoming what I was always meant to be, and nothing, not even you, can stop it." Kale's chest tightened as he realized the truth. Lyria was no longer the person he had once known, and now there was no turning back. The silence that had descended upon their small outpost was now oppressive, as though the air itself had thickened with the weight of an inevitable storm. Kel's mind churned with confusion, his every thought wrapped around the fear and uncertainty of what he was witnessing. Lyria had become something beyond his comprehension, a being of raw power, untethered to any sense of control. Every moment spent in her presence now felt like walking a razor's edge. One wrong move, one slip, and everything they had fought for would come crashing down. It had been days since Kale had confronted her in the ruined courtyard, and the days since had only served to deepen his unease. Lyria had become more distant, not in body but in mind. She was slipping further away from her humanity, her thoughts consumed by the immense power she wielded. Kale couldn't understand what she was feeling, what she was becoming, and though he still couldn't bring himself to regret saving her, a nagging sense of guilt gnawed at him. Was this really what he had wanted? Had he saved her, or had he damned them both? Lyria had stopped speaking to him as much, her gaze often distant, lost in some far-off place that Kale could never reach. The golden light that had once flickered from her crown now blazed relentlessly, pulsing with energy, as if it were a living thing. Sometimes, Kale could feel it, an undercurrent of power that seemed to vibrate in the air, the faintest hum beneath his skin, as though the very world around them was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable to happen. Kale had seen power like this before, but never like this. This wasn't a weapon, a force of destruction, it was something deeper. It was as though Lyria herself had become the embodiment of a new kind of life. The Council, the alien leaders who had once ruled her people with an iron fist, would never allow this. No, they would not accept a princess transformed into something so unrecognizable. If they had their way, they would destroy her, and by extension, destroy everything Kale had tried to protect. And so, Kale found himself torn. His duty as a soldier was to protect humanity, his people. But standing here, in the midst of Lyria's transformation, Kale realized that there was something more at stake than just the survival of one species. It was the survival of two worlds, one human, one alien, and the future that lay ahead of them. But what was that future? What would happen if the Council found out what had happened? What if they knew what he had done? Would they see him as a traitor, as a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding? Or would they see him as the only one who could stand between them and the wrath of Lyria's newfound power? Kel's thoughts were interrupted as Lyria stood, her form framed by the light of the dying sun. Her eyes glowed with that eerie golden fire, and as she turned to him, Kale couldn't help but feel a surge of fear. Not of her, but for her. She was no longer the woman he had once tried to save. She was something else, something alien, something that could never go back to what it had been. "You're thinking too much, Kale," Lyria said, her voice low and almost melodic. "Your mind races, but you still don't understand." Kale stepped forward, his breath caught in his throat. "What don't I understand, Lyria? What is happening to you? What did my blood do to you?" Lyria's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it, only a cold, unsettling power. "Your blood gave me life, but not just any life. It gave me a new kind of existence. I am no longer bound by the same laws that govern you. I am beyond the old world, the old ways. I am something different. Kel's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of her words settled over him. Different, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Lyria, what are you saying? She turned her gaze to the horizon, her golden eyes reflecting the fading light of the setting sun. I'm saying that the council will come for me. They will try to destroy me, to erase what I've become. But they can't, Kale. They won't be able to stop it. This power, it's not something they can control. It's not something anyone can control. For a moment, Kale was speechless. He had heard whispers about the council before, how they ruled with fear and violence, how they crushed anything that threatened their reign. But he had never truly understood the depth of their ruthlessness until now. They would come, just as Lyria had said, and they would try to end everything he and Lyria had begun. But the question remained, would Lyria fight against them? Or would she embrace the power that had changed her so completely? Would she side with her own kind, the ones who had sent her to war against humanity? Or would she become the harbinger of something entirely new, something beyond the grasp of her people or his? Kel's mind raced, his pulse quickening as the weight of her words began to sink in. He had always believed in the ideals of war, of fighting for something greater than oneself. But what if this wasn't just about fighting? What if this was about survival? About finding a way to bridge the chasm between two worlds that had been at war for so long? And what if that bridge was built by Lyria herself? I don't know what to do anymore, Kale admitted, his voice strained with the conflict in his chest. I never asked for this. I never asked for any of this. Lyria turned back to him, her expression softening for the first time in days. You didn't have a choice, Kale. Neither of us did. What happens next is beyond both of us. But that doesn't mean we don't have a choice now. We choose what we become, and we choose what the future will look like. She stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming, like the calm before a storm. Kale could feel the power radiating from her, and yet he didn't step back. For all the fear he felt, there was something else, something deep inside him that told him that no matter what came next, he would stand with her. In that moment, Kale understood that the war, the struggle, the choices they had made, none of it would matter if they didn't learn to face the future together. But what that future would look like was a question neither of them had an answer to. The council was coming, and Kale had a choice to make. The question was no longer about survival, it was about who would control the future. The air was thick with tension as Kale and Lyria stood on the edge of the precipice, their backs to the vast wilderness that stretched before them. In the distance, the silhouette of the alien city loomed, its towering spires rising like a reminder of what was at stake. The council was coming for them, and they had no time to waste. Kale had never felt the weight of uncertainty so heavily pressing down on his shoulders for days. They had avoided the advancing forces, retreating into the wilds as Lyria's transformation grew ever more unpredictable. She was stronger, yes, but also more volatile. There were moments when her golden eyes flickered with something darker, something Kale couldn't understand. It was as if the power inside her wasn't just an extension of herself, it was becoming her, reshaping her very essence, pulling her further away from the person she had once been. And Kale, though he had fought beside her, had never felt more like a stranger in her presence. It wasn't just the power that made him uneasy. It was the feeling of being caught in a storm with no way out. The weight of the decisions they had made pressed heavily on him, and with every passing day, he found himself questioning the path they had taken. He had saved her, yes, but in doing so, had he unwittingly set into motion a chain of events that would destroy everything? Kale, Lyria said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. The sound of her voice sent a shiver down his spine. She was standing at the edge of a cliff, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The wind ruffled her hair, and the golden light of her crown pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and ominous. I can feel them, she continued, her voice distant, almost detached. The council. They're close. Too close. Kel's eyes narrowed. He could feel it too, an unspoken pressure in the air, a sense of inevitability that gnawed at the edges of his mind. The alien council was ruthless. They had a reputation for crushing any threat to their power, and Lyria, their princess, was now their greatest threat. There was no way they would let her live, not after what had happened. She was no longer the princess they had sent to war. She was something else entirely, a being imbued with a power they couldn't control. We have to leave, Kale said, his voice low and urgent. We can't stay here. They'll find us. But Lyria didn't move. She simply stood there, her gaze locked on the horizon, her body trembling with an energy Kale couldn't understand. "No, Kale," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's too late for us to run. The council will hunt us no matter where we go. We have to face them." Kale stepped forward, his pulse quickening. He reached out, gently grasping her arm. "Lyria, please. You're not thinking clearly. This power, it's changing you. You're not the same person you were. You don't have to fight them alone." Her golden eyes turned to him, and for a moment, Kale saw something flicker, something almost human, almost vulnerable. But it was gone as quickly as it had come. "I'm not alone, Kale," she said, her voice colder now. "I never was. I don't need your protection. I never did." Her words stung, and Kale felt his chest tighten with a mixture of anger and hurt. He had been trying to save her, trying to bring her back from the brink of destruction. But now, it felt as though he were the one in danger. Lyria wasn't just losing herself, she was pushing him away. The bond they had shared, fragile as it was, seemed to be breaking before his very eyes. "I'm not trying to protect you, Lyria," Kale said, his voice hoarse. "I'm trying to help you. I don't want to lose you to this power. You are still human, somewhere inside. You don't have to become this thing." She turned away from him, her shoulders stiff with defiance. "You don't understand, Kale. I've never been just human. I've always been a part of something bigger. The council is nothing. They are a shadow of what I can be. You're the one who saved me, but you don't see it. I'm not meant to fight with you, I'm meant to change everything." Kale's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean, change everything?" Lyria's voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't go back, Kale. You gave me your blood, and with it, you gave me a new kind of life. The power I have, it's not just from your blood. It's from something else, something older. It's the power of the very universe itself. I can feel it inside me, flowing through me, and I can't stop it." Kale felt a cold shiver run down his spine as the weight of her words settled in. She wasn't just speaking in metaphors. She wasn't just some alien princess caught in the throes of an awakening power. She was becoming something else, something that transcended the boundaries of what he understood. She was right. She wasn't just human anymore. She wasn't even just an alien princess. She was something beyond all of it, a force, a power, a being that was no longer bound by the same rules as either of them, and it scared him. "What happens now?" Kale asked, his voice barely a whisper, though he was terrified of the answer. Lyria turned back to him, her golden eyes now glowing with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "We face them," she said simply. "The council wants to destroy me, to erase me, but they won't be able to. They won't stop me." Kale felt his stomach twist with unease. "Lyria, if you do this, if you fight them, there's no turning back. You'll destroy everything." "I've already destroyed everything, Kale," Lyria said, her voice soft, but there was no doubt in it. "I've already crossed the point of no return. The council will never forgive me. I have to make them understand that I'm no longer just their pawn. I'm something more." Kale could see it now, the shift in her. The way she had been consumed by the power she had once resisted. She had become the very thing she had feared, and now there was no going back. The council wouldn't let her live, and Kale knew they wouldn't stop until they destroyed everything she had become. But what about him? Where did he fit into this new reality she was creating? Was he just a bystander, watching as she became something unrecognizable? Or was he part of the plan, part of the rebellion she was about to ignite? The questions swirled in his mind, and as he looked into her eyes, he realized there was no simple answer. The world was shifting beneath their feet, and the storm was about to break. The council would come. The war would reach its breaking point, and in the end, it would be Lyria who determined whether they would rise or fall. But Kale had a choice to make, and whatever he decided would change the course of everything. The sun had set, leaving the world bathed in an eerie twilight. The air was thick with the smell of burned earth and the distant hum of a planet on the edge of war. The wind whispered through the trees, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Kale stood at the edge of the cliff with Lyria beside him, both of them gazing out at the horizon, their minds heavy with the weight of what was to come. The council was near. He could feel it in the air, their presence, their looming threat. The once mighty rulers of the alien empire had sent their best to track them down. to reclaim Lyria and punish the betrayal she represented. The army was closing in, and Kale knew there was no escaping them this time. There was no running, no more hiding. Lyria turned to him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Was it sadness, regret, or was it something darker, acceptance of the inevitable? "Kale," she said, her voice distant but steady. "It's time." He looked at her, his heart heavy with a mix of fear and admiration. She was no longer the same princess he had tried to save. She wasn't even the same person who had once questioned her place in the universe. She had become something else, something greater, but also something terrifying. The power coursing through her veins had changed her. It had consumed her. And now, she was standing on the precipice of a war that neither of them could control. "What happens now?" Kale asked, his voice strained, uncertain. "We can't just face the council head-on. They'll destroy everything. They'll destroy you." Lyria's gaze softened, but there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "They've already destroyed everything, Kale. The moment I became something more. I stopped being a part of their system. I stopped being their princess. I became something else, something beyond their reach." Kel's heart pounded in his chest. He had tried so hard to save her from this, but now he realized that she had already crossed a line that couldn't be undone. She had become a force that could not be contained, not by her people, not by the council, and certainly not by him. "They won't stop, Lyria," Kale said, his voice thick with urgency. "They'll come for you with everything they have. They'll wipe out entire worlds to get you back. You can't take them all on. You don't know what they're capable of." Lyria turned away from him, her gaze fixed on the distant city where the council's forces were gathering. "I don't need to know what they're capable of, Kale. I know what I'm capable of, and they will understand that soon enough." A chill ran down Kel's spine as he watched her. There was no hesitation in her words, no doubt. She was already preparing for what was coming. She had accepted it, but he couldn't bring himself to do the same. He had been fighting for survival all his life. He had seen death, loss, and destruction, but never like this. This wasn't just a battle. This was the beginning of something that could change the fate of both their worlds. "I can't let you do this alone," Kale said, his voice rising with the desperation he had kept hidden for so long. "I won't let you destroy everything. I won't let you become something you can't control." Lyria looked back at him, her eyes burning with intensity. "You don't understand, Kale. I already control it. It's inside me. It has been since the moment you gave me your blood. And now, there is no going back." She stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming. Kale could feel the power radiating from her, an energy so palpable it made the air shimmer round them. The ground seemed to hum beneath his feet, as if even the planet itself could sense the changes that were unfolding. He was standing beside something so far beyond him that it both terrified and awed him. "I gave you my blood to save you," Kale said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Not to make you into this weapon. You're not just a tool to be used, Lyria. You're not just some force of nature. You're still a person." Lyria's expression softened for a moment, and Kale saw a flicker of the woman she had once been. But it was fleeting, replaced quickly by the cool, calculating gaze of the being she had become. "I'm still a person, Kale," she said, her voice low and steady. "But I am not the person you knew. I am more than that now. I am the change, and I can't undo it. Neither can you." The words hit Kale like a punch to the gut. He had always believed that there was a way to save her, a way to bring her back from the brink. But now, standing here, he realized that there was no saving her, not in the way he had hoped. She had already made her choice, and so had he. "You don't have to fight them, Lyria," Kale said, his voice pleading. "You don't have to fight at all. We can run. We can escape this. We can find a way to make it right." Lyria's gaze softened again, but this time, there was a hint of sorrow in her eyes. "You don't understand, Kale. This isn't about running anymore. This is about standing and facing what we've become. We can't hide. Not from them. Not from ourselves." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. Kel's heart skipped a beat as he turned, his instinct screaming that the moment they had been dreading was finally upon them. The council's forces were here. The battle was about to begin. "They're here," Kale whispered, his voice hoarse with the realization of what was about to unfold. "It's too late. Lyria's eyes burned brighter now, her golden gaze piercing through the darkness. It's never too late. It's just the beginning. As the first wave of the Council's forces appeared on the horizon, Cale knew there was no turning back. The war had shifted. The future of both their worlds hung in the balance, and there was nothing left to do but face what was coming. Lyria stepped forward, her hand outstretched, the air around her crackling with energy. "Are you with me, Cale?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of everything they had fought for, and everything they were about to lose. Cale stood there for a moment, his heart heavy with the choices they had made and the choices they still had to face. And then, with a final glance at the woman who had once been his ally, his love, he stepped forward and stood beside her. The storm was here, and now they would face it together.